Well, I'm sure a number of you will remember my New Year video. Yeah, what is it? 11 months ago now, where I said we were going to be in lockdown permanently, in some form, maybe some mutated form. Sadly, yet again, I've been proved right. I didn't want to be, but I have been, as I consistently am. This is a problem now. We now have a great deal of difficulty travelling outside the country. That's been made very difficult for us. Almost as difficult as it was in 1950s, 1960s East Germany to get out of the country unless you went through all the hoops. So we've got a sort of weird sort of lockdown in our own country, a sort of break on our travel, our free travel, which we've come to expect in a free society. We've also, of course, had a lockdown coercion system run by the government. So we know that care home workers have lost their jobs, and I've covered this before, unless they submitted to mass medication. We know that the National Health Service is going to be subject to the same thing in the spring. We've seen other companies, and one of them, very disappointingly, Aldi, has suggested that they will not be employing anybody who isn't double jabbed or boosted or whatever the situation is. So, yes, I was right. We have lockdown in some mutated form and variant forms. And of course, we're having the threat of more lockdown by the Conservative Party and government representatives saying, if we don't do this, this and this, they'll close our Christmas or take away Christmas, or we can't go to the pub. Already in Wales, you can't go into the theatres and you can't do certain other things unless you have this double jab. And I've covered this jab and risk assessment, so on and so forth, many times. I don't seem to go down that route again today. There's no need. There's plenty of other videos I've done this on. What is manifesting itself in an extremely unpleasant and dangerous way is the resurgence in fascism in Europe. Ironically, it's starting with the old Axis countries, isn't it? It's starting with Germany, Austria and Italy, the old fascist and national socialist countries. Who felt that they could just not control our minds but control our bodies, and the whole thing was built on massive propaganda. It was a huge propaganda machine, and we all know that Goebbels probably was the master of propaganda. I remember my father telling me, he was a fighter pilot in the war, that in early 1945 he listened to a Goebbels broadcast and it almost persuaded him that the Germans were going to win the war. Very powerful thing, propaganda, especially for the suggestible and the gullible. And especially if you're only getting it from one source. And of course the establishment own mainstream media. Dissent is not allowed. And social media, of course, is being heavily censored. And I'm shadow banned on various channels, taken down on certain channels. So it's becoming more and more difficult for you to hear a voice which isn't that of government. Now, in these countries like Germany and Austria and Italy, for a start in Italy, now you can't work unless you had the double jab. And I have Italian friends who are in this country already who are looking for somewhere to live and getting jobs here because they can't go back to Italy because they don't believe in mass medication, and some of the ladies still breastfeeding, so on and so forth. So Italy is the problem. And we've gone from that in Austria to actually a situation where it was lockdown, you were locked in your own home, which is disgraceful and appalling enough. But now it's going to be, you're actually going to be held down. You're going to be held down and forcibly injected against the whole concept of the Nuremberg Code, which prohibited this kind of behaviour from the state for the very countries that invented this kind of thing, Germany being the lead game, all right? The Nazis started this, forcibly medicating people against their will. Now this is going to get worse and worse and worse. Because just as in pre-war Britain, Hitler and the Nazis had their fellow travellers. They had people at very senior level. The aristocracy, members of the royal family, who thought basically Hitler was doing a jolly good job. He solved unemployment, so they believed, so on and so forth, and he was doing basically a good job. And certainly senior members of the royal family and the aristocracy felt the same way. And we're going back there, aren't we? We have the fellow travellers here in Great Britain. We don't have an aristocracy per se, which is influential anymore, but we have a telestocracy. All this is going through with no sign of dissent or pushback from mainstream media. This is appalling. And you've got to think about it, haven't you? We're not even using parliamentary procedures for a lot of this. It's not even being debated in Parliament. And there is a big sympathy now. We've gone from coercion for mass medication to enforcement. And we're on the brink now of enforcement. And nobody seems to be caring. Nobody seems to be worried. And people seem to think it's all right, especially in mainstream media. Well, it's not all right. It's not all right. It has to stop. We have to push back against this. They're pushing back a bit in Australia, and I think they're pushing back a bit in Austria, but we've all got to stand together here. We've got to stand together across the globe and fight back, because this is the end of freedom in the liberal democracies as we perceive them since the war. We thought we lived in free countries. Australia, New Zealand, Western Europe had become free, North America, and it's changing before our very eyes, and it's like the boiled frog concept, isn't it? And those who are not familiar with it, very few of you I'm sure, that if you put a frog into tepid water, if you boil up the kettle slowly enough, it doesn't know it's being boiled to death. Well, that's the public at the moment, that's mainstream media at the moment. It's the boiled frog. It's happening so slowly and gradually, bit by bit, that you're not pushing back. Well, I warned you of this last January. I've been right about this all along, and I'm not alone. There are others, and there are some very mild sceptics when it comes to this kind of thing, actually beginning to wake up. A few Rip Van Winkles. It's been obvious to me and obvious to a lot of you watching this clip what's been going on for some time. Let's hope it gets a little bit more obvious and we start to do something about it, because if we don't stop it now, we'll never stop it. It'll go beyond our control. We'll never get our freedoms back. You never get freedoms back from the state. And bear in mind, a Prime Minister who doesn't have to go through any form of parliamentary discipline or debate is a very happy man. It means he can do just what he damn well likes at number 10 with his little cartel of unelected little people, those creepy little people like Vallance and Whitty, creepy little people that work with him, and a politicised police force which can enforce it. And we have members of the royal family who don't want to be constitutional monarchs. They don't want to be constitutional. They like the idea of being a medieval king. I think the future king of England would love to be a medieval king and do just what he likes when he likes. And all the billionaires across the world flying all over the place in their private jets, and celebrities in their private jets, getting together for one great big party, every now and again to save the planet. They can't do what the pre-war New York hostesses used to do, have monster parties. They have to put a charity on it. It has to be for your own good. So this is what's happening. Everybody, the rich, the powerful and the elite are gradually getting the reins of control and taking away the democratic freedoms that are actually enshrined in our Constitution, the American Constitution, the British Bill of Rights. The principles of English law have been swept away. And they're being swept away largely because you're letting them do it. You're letting them do it. With your masks, and you walk around, don't you, with your masks and doing as you're told. Good little citizen. It's going to get you nowhere. Well, greetings to you. As you know, social media was a wonderful invention so that we could all communicate with each other and share our views, and share views that aren't necessarily in line with the establishment, the global establishment, which is run mainly by banks and big pharma. So I've been doing my best to do that, but I am increasingly being shadow banned or taken down, and so are many others. So beware of that, and I will be tagging anything I do in the future with various sources and various channels so that you will know, well, I've been censored from this, but I've been censored, but you can find it somewhere else. So the whole thing can continue. And I think some of these new channels, which aren't owned by the establishment or influenced by the establishment, banks and big pharma and all the rest, you'll be able to follow the facts. And that doesn't mean fact checkers, of course, which are owned by the establishment. So I just thought I'd give you the heads up on that. And thank you for your sponsorship and your support. I thank you for it. Without you and the information that sometimes you people send me, I couldn't continue. Thank you again. As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research based. and I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I automatically share it with you. So surprise, won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.